And I wonder if there was not some other cosmic interaction like that where God is displaying what he can do through this type of being. Does that make
So
sense?
we're all just a bet, basically.
I know.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me on Growing Up Fundie. I'm so excited to have you as a guest. I've been looking forward to it. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited too. Actually, this is the first time I've ever done a podcast as a guest.
Really? That's actually really surprising.
Yeah.
So for people who are just now tuning in and don't know, and I don't know why they would because you've never been on here before, we are both
I'm kind
members.
of a big deal.
Yeah, kind of a big deal, actually. Aaron with one name. Yeah, pretty much a big deal. We are both members of the Conversation Coalition, which is a group of 4 Christians and 4 atheists here in Nashville who host live on-stage conversations for the public to attend for free. And we pick a different topic every month. And then the last Thursday of the month, people can come, they can get snacks, they can chill, they can vibe, and they can listen to us talk about important topics. And so I thought it was important also to have you on here so they could learn about you as a person. Because I know a lot. It's very interesting. Usually when you meet people, the last thing you learn about is like their religious opinions.
Yeah.
They're like, but I feel like we're doing things backwards a little bit with our group.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I know where he stands theologically, but I'm curious where he's from. Like, I don't.
Yeah, because that's like the whole basis of it, right?
Yeah.
Is digging into that.
Right. Absolutely. And so what I thought was interesting about your background is that usually when I have members of Convo Coalition on here, it's the atheists. And so I'm super curious to get your perspective. And earlier, before we were officially on the record, we talked a little bit about your religious beliefs, and you mentioned that you were a member of Reformed, and that is, I'll let you describe it. Tell us a little bit about Reformed and what that is.
Actually, that's kind of interesting. I agree with Reformed theology. I actually attend a Pentecostal church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Which is
interesting.
And they definitely have beliefs that clash with mine. Free will is a good example of one, right? That libertarian
you don't have
will.
Long flowing hair.
Right, exactly. So I don't have any rattlesnakes. No. So like one thing I'll hear the pastor talk about is free will, right? This idea of like a libertarian free will where God can't violate your free will. That's not something I subscribe to. But at the same time, there's a million things about the church that I love. I serve there. I work on, I'm a video director. I work the cameras. I love the people, the music's great. The guy preaches the truth, so there are some theological things that are different, but overall, I just really enjoy the church.
So when you say that you don't believe that, you do believe that God can kind of intervene with your free will, do you think it's a situation where God gives us free will and chooses not to engage with it, but he could if he wanted to? Is that kind of where you stand?
It's actually more, I think of it as primary, secondary causes, right? Like God has decreed everything from the beginning to the end, right? That's what he tells us, right? He knows the beginning from the end. He's decreed all things. Everything's working out according to his plan. In that statement, there's not a lot of wiggle room for you to just go off and do your own thing, right?
Right.
The implication being I could make God use plan B if I didn't follow his plan. Right. So there's that. That's like the primary cause, right? God's decree. But there's also secondary causes, which is to a certain extent, and it's not libertarian. I can do whatever I want, but there is free will in that I am doing what I want to do, right? Like I'm behaving the way that I want to behave within the context of that decree. I think a good way to explain it, this made sense to me. Like, why does it rain? Well, because of the water cycle, right? Water evaporates and then it gathers and when it gets so dense it rains, right? That's why it rains. Also, God causes it to rain. Okay. So you see what I'm saying? There's two things happening there.
Would you say that the reason you feel like you're doing whatever you want to do is because God made you want to do it that way?
No, let's see, because God created me to want to do things certain ways.
Yeah. So God's like, I'm going to make you, say, for example, love chocolate because you loving chocolate is part of my plan. It's part of my design for you. And so when you really enjoy chocolate, you feel like you're doing it because you want to, when maybe in reality, that's kind of how you were created and designed.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense to me. I can go with that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it gets weird because then the first thing that comes to mind is bad stuff, right? So then, well, what about the people that do all kinds of bad stuff, right?
Right.
That's the first. This is actually part of my journey. When I said I became Reformed, it took me years. It took me years to finally come to peace with the sovereignty of God, with what that meant, that God was sovereign over everything, and He was the first cause of everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And not like in a puppet sort of way, right? I'm not a robot.
Right.
But just that He is in control of everything, and that nothing escapes His plan. And that's because what comes with that is all the bad stuff. So then you have to deal with that. That's the next question, right?
Got it. And so that is a very interesting question. So when you think about God kind of creating everything and designing everything and being in charge of everything, and you say that you came to peace with God's design, somebody who's not religious might say, what is the difference between that and, say, like Stockholm syndrome? And like, I'm at peace with the fact that no matter what, I can't change anything. So now I'm happy, even though maybe you're not.
So when I say I came to peace with the sovereignty of God, what I meant is that it's hard to give up that. Let's see. It's hard to give up this idea of free will, right? That I'm free, that I'm doing what I want when I want, and that, right, God is not controlling me. And He's not controlling me, but that's like something that's baked into us, especially as like Americans. We are autonomous, free creatures, right? So I think that there's like a submission to that. I think some of the big things are like, you asked about Stockholm syndrome. I don't feel like I'm coming to terms with the fact that God's controlling me. That's not what I meant.
Okay.
The big thing I had to come to terms with was, if God is sovereign over everything, that means He's using evil to accomplish His good purposes. That was the hard part. That was the hard part. Yeah.
Got it. So even evil is part of His plan, kind of. Got it.
Well, if Jesus was the lamb slain before the foundations of the world, then that means He was always going to be slain. So there is no plan B with God. Once He's puts His decree forward, and things begin. Once He makes a covenant or a promise, He can't go back on it. So things must play out the way He has said. Otherwise, it would make Him a liar, right?
Right. Well, and something I've always said, and like, you can go back and listen to other episodes. People listening to this know I've said this 100,000 times. Before the episode, you kind of compared Reformed, and to specify to the audience, we're not talking about Reformed blank, like Reformed Baptist, Reformed Catholic. The literally Reformed is its own thing. You compared it to Calvinism. Yeah. And one thing I've always said is, a lot of people think Calvinists are pretty intense, but I've always said what I appreciate about Calvinists is they're honest. Even if it doesn't sound pretty, even if it doesn't sound ideal, they are always honest. You say like, well, when I said, what's the difference between that and Stockholm syndrome? You were like, well, that's a great question. Like, let me think about this for a second. Maybe it's not different. Let me think about it for a second. Right. Because it's what I think a lot of people, like, I grew up Baptist, and what Baptists do is they try to make everything beautiful. It's like, no, it's not like that. What I think Calvinists do is they go, yeah, that's what it says. That's how it is.
It's what it is. And I don't have the answer for everything. I'm not saying that. I don't have the answer for everything. But it's a very consistent, I think, a very consistent way to read the Bible. I don't have to try to apologize for who God is. He is who He is. He didn't apologize in the Bible, and I'm certainly not going to apologize for Him. Right.
Got it.
And I wholeheartedly believe that the reason that people struggle when they leave the church and they go into the world, the reason that people struggle is because no one ever asks them, how is it that God uses evil to accomplish His good purposes in the safe space of church, and then talk about it? right? And then explain it. And that took me years to wrap my mind around, of listening to people talk and reading and studying, and mostly just rejecting it in my heart. Like, no, I can't be that way, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the hard part. And I think it is difficult. Those are difficult questions. And
right.
Because that's the people go for the jugular right there, right?
Yeah.
When you leave the church, that's what they go for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so how it sounds like you're very much convinced that there is your future is kind of predestined for you.
Mm-hmm,
God has
mm-hmm,
predetermined your journey,
mm-hmm,
whether or not you like chocolate because he makes you like chocolate,
mm-hmm.
it's up for discussion. So how does one find joy in that, or peace in that, when a lot of people might find stress and anxiety in that, realizing that they don't actually have any control?
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually think it doesn't bother me. So I feel like it's a story that's written, and I am actually making decisions through the story as it unfolds in front of me. But it doesn't bother me. In fact, it's a sense of calm, because when things go wrong, I'm like, well, I know that there's an end to this. It's already worked out, right? The Bible tells me that God is working out, working for good. What's the verse now? I just lost it. But God is working all things out for the good of those that love him, right? So he's, whether it's bad stuff happened to me or not, he's working it out, and it's already done. I just have to get there. I got to do my best. I got to make my decisions to get there. So it's peaceful in that respect. So it doesn't bother me at all in that respect.
So like, are you saying you pretty much like trust what he has in store for you?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so why do you think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but why do you think God would design atheists like me if there's no good that comes out of that, if that makes sense?
Well, I would say we don't know what good will come out of it.
I like to think a really good podcast has come out.
Yes, exactly. Or you don't know. Someone might hear this, and someone who's a Christian or an atheist might hear this, and it might change kind of the trajectory of their life. But that's another thing that I think is a hard part about just submitting to the sovereignty of God, is that means that he created some people who won't believe in him, right? And I don't know. That's just tough. It's tough to think that there are people in my life that I know and love, and I'm like, oh man, I know they're not believers. And again, their story's not written. Some people actually are dead, but you think, man, I don't get it. But I believe in the end. I believe, and this is based off just my own personal belief, that in the end God will be vindicated. Not that he needs to be, but that at the end we'll stand there in the final moments and we'll look around and we'll go, oh, okay, all right, I get it now. I get it. Right. But that's the only, again, this is being a Calvinist and submitting to the sovereignty of God, is like, there's no other consistent way to look at it. If I start hem-hawing around and trying to tell you how you're the one, or people who aren't Christians are actually controlling their own fate and making decisions that God has no control over, well, then we get inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
So
you hear that, Gary?
Yeah.
You hear that? Piece of shit.
So like, I gotta stick with it. I go, yeah, he created, for whatever reason. I mean, this is not comforting in any way, but I mean, God wanted to display all of his characteristics, and that includes mercy, and it also includes justice, right? And so,
do you think it's justice, though, if he sets up the scenario in which the justice needs to be found for, if that makes sense? Like, he wouldn't need to seek justice if he didn't invent the scenario in which justice might need to be sought.
Well, so that's the interesting part, because he actually created the earth perfect and people without sin, although the fall was definitely part of the plan, right? If Jesus was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. So, right, that's the primary, secondary causes. Yes, I do think it's justice, because I think you're doing what you want to do. I think you are doing what you will to do. What you will to do is rebel against God. I don't mean this like a sermon, but, and I don't mean you particularly, but
I mean, I am a rebel.
Right?
I'm just,
that's the short hair. That's what it is.
I'm just saying, I'm a rebel without a cause.
But right. Because I'm doing what I want to do and you're doing what you want to do. But
are we though? Or are we doing what God wants us to want to do?
Actions and time definitely matter. Like we're definitely doing what we want to do, and action and time matter. And I would defend that by saying, if it didn't matter, then why did Jesus come live on the earth for 33 years roughly, and then be crucified and die and then rise again? And if he actually had to live a perfect life so that he could actually for real be the perfect sacrifice. He couldn't just flutter down from heaven, hit the cross for a minute, right? Get a selfie and then flutter back up. And then flutter back to heaven. It actually had to happen. And that tells me, I go, okay, I don't understand it all. I don't understand it all, but I know actions and time matter. Cause think about God left like that eternal perfection to become a man for eternity. Like I like dogs, but I would never become a dog for eternity to save all dogs.
I mean, my dog's got a really great life. I don't know if you can hear her snoring back there, but I'm thinking about it, to be honest with you. Just dropped my pen. Sorry.
You're good.
So this is a very, or it seems like a very set in stone belief, which honestly, respect, because I would much rather you say, like, I really don't have all the answers than do what I call the Baptist thing, where they're like, no, you just misread it, or you misunderstood, or it's a different time, that sort of thing. So then what makes someone lean into, because you were not raised this way, you were raised conservative Baptist or non-denominational, but we agree that's Baptist. That's Baptist. And so
Baptist light.
Yeah, exactly. And so what makes you say, I actually like the version where I have no choice in the matter?
The problem that I had with the theology that I had developed growing up is that I felt like I was always apologizing for the Bible.
That's a good point. No, I mean, touché. Yeah.
So I felt like I was always trying to come up with escape plans. Free will is one of them, where I was trying to get God off the hook for who he is. And I heard someone else say it. This is actually what kind of started me on the path, is someone else said, God doesn't apologize for who he is. Why would you apologize? And I was like, that's interesting. Like, who is God then? Let me look at it from that perspective and just accept everything who he tells me he is. And you ask questions about you, because you're trying to work out in your head, like, how is it that God has this sovereign decree, but also I'm responsible for who I am, which is obviously in the Bible, right? Like there's a passage in the Old Testament where he's talking about the Assyrians, and he's like, the Assyrians are bad people, and I'm going to use them to punish Israel, and they're going to be the rod in my hand, and I'm going to and when the Assyrians punish Israel, it's not a good day, right? Like it's the worst of the worst happening.
Right.
And at the same time, afterwards, he's like, and then I'm going to hold you accountable because you did it out of your arrogance. You didn't know that you were, acting in judgment, in my judgment. You weren't being the judge for me. You were doing it because you're arrogant. So I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And so there's something happening right there where people are living out God's decree, but he's also holding them accountable. And we have both. And I think it is contradictory in a way. I want to say this is a hard part of being a Calvinist. This is a hard part about accepting this, because these two things seem to be in conflict. So then in my mind, I'm trying to harmonize them, right? I.e. where the first cause, second cause explanation comes from, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to harmonize those two things because they do, I think on the surface, first feel contradictory. Although I feel like it's hard to explain in my mind. I don't feel like they're contradictory, but they probably sound like it.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're talking to an atheist. Everything sounds contradictory. You're good. It's all everything. So then what is it, if anything, if you don't mind me asking, what is it that you do not care for in the faith or in the Bible? What do you read where you're like, that is tough to hear, and I wish that weren't the case?
Two things. One is God using evil to accomplish his good purposes. And the other one is like Romans, where he says, Paul writes, what if God, wanting to display his mercy, created vessels for, redemption, and on the other hand, wanted to display his wrath, so he created vessels doomed for destruction. Right. And as the creator, God has the freedom to do that, is the answer that you're given. And then in the text, Paul's like anticipating the response of whoever's reading it. And when the response he anticipates is the objection he's overcoming as well, how am I at fault? How is it my fault is the question, right?
Yeah.
And the answer you get is this: I don't like this, but what else could I get? Is he says, God's response is, "Who are you, oh man, to answer back to me?" And that is the consistent response from God. I'm sorry, my dog walked over, so I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't touch any cables.
Oh, you're good.
That is the consistent response from God whenever someone answers back to him and says, "How dare you do this?" Right? How is it that you're doing this? I mean, in Job, God's whole diatribe is basically like, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? Where were you when I did this? How are you going to do this?" Right? And then the answer at the end that Job comes to, the right answer is, "I'm just going to shut up and sit down."
Yeah, Job's like, "You know what? Forget I asked."
Yes, because I don't know. Right? And so that's where I go. That's all I got. That's really all I got is, how dare you answer back? How dare you accuse me of being unjust? And how could I? Because what do I have? 46 years of knowledge. I'll even put that in scare quotes. Like, I got 46 years of experience of being alive. How would I tell God that he is doing the wrong thing? Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And I think that does lead more towards the idea that, one of the number one things I hear people ask Christians is, if God controls everything, why would he send his son to sacrifice himself for something he could have stopped from happening to begin with? Like, why would he invent humans as sinners in order to have to send his own son?
Yeah.
But I feel like the answer you've provided kind of leans more toward that I don't want to say character, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but that personality, I suppose, of this leader, this creator who has these ideas behind creating people that do worship him, creating people that don't worship him, creating sin when it doesn't have to exist, in order to give people the option to make decisions, but also knowing those decisions. And so, in your opinion, why do you think somebody would do all of those things instead of just creating a utopia of beauty and perfection that worships them all the time?
So, because this is what you said there is what happens when you reason from yourself up to God. Well, why would you do this to me? And so I try to reason from God down to myself. Right? Got it. So I start there and reason down. I would say the story of man is not about man. It's God glorifying himself through the redemption of a particular people. That's how I would phrase it. Yeah. And I would say he wanted to demonstrate all of his characteristics: his patience, right? His kindness, his loving kindness, his mercy, his wrath, his justice, all of the things, because he's not just love, right? That's what we like to focus on. And God is love. That's 100%, as he demonstrated through Jesus. But he's also like wrath. He's also justice. He's vengeance. He says, "Vengeance is mine," right? He is all of those things, all of those characteristics. So I think that he wanted to display all of those characteristics.
And why do you think that was important to him?
We're not told, because he certainly doesn't need it. When he doesn't desire or want for people to worship him or lack people worshiping him. So it comes from him, and it's for him, and it's through him and by him, and right. So it's definitely all starts with him. But I don't actually know why. So this is nothing to do with the Bible. Okay. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. Okay. You know the story in Job or do you know the beginning of Job where Satan comes to God and God says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" Right? Yeah. And Satan says, "Oh yeah, but he only follows you because you're so good to him." Right? Yeah. Yeah. I love that story, and I love that interaction. And I wonder if there was not some other cosmic interaction like that, where God is displaying what he can do through this type of being. Does that make sense?
So we're all just a bet, basically.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, hey, that would make a lot more sense
on the thing. But like the challenge is I don't know, because he clearly is up for the challenge with Job, and he's willing to allow Satan to put Job through whatever,
right?
So there's definitely a separation between, even though, like I said, God decreed these things and he knows they're going to happen. There's definitely a difference between God doing something and God allowing Satan or someone else to do something.
So right? It's more like
there's a separation there.
Right. So like he doesn't actively make something happen, but he more allows the necessary steps or tools involved in that thing happening to exist.
And it matters that it happened. In other words, we always knew Adam was going to fall, but God created him perfect. He didn't have to sin. He, like, think of his will. Obviously we have this bigger decree, but his will, he created him perfect. He gave him everything he needed. He also gave him the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and told him, don't do that. Right. So he could have just pulled that out of that
but wouldn't that
variable out of the equation?
But wouldn't that mean that actually he did know that Adam was going to sin and he didn't make him perfect? Because wouldn't God have known that when he created Adam, that he was going to do that? Sorry if you can hear my dog snoring.
Yeah, well, when I say perfect, I mean without sin. I don't mean like perfect like God's perfect.
Got it.
Yeah,
got it.
I mean perfect without sin.
So I guess, in your opinion, what do you think that was all for? Just to showcase his abilities? Like you said, maybe there's some cosmic bet, for a better word, going on.
Yeah, something else, something bigger that we don't understand that would cause him to want to do this. Because
that would honestly make a lot of sense. No, seriously, that's the best example I've ever heard. Seriously, for that question, like I would believe all of this stuff if we were all just a bet, basically.
A big cosmic contest.
Yeah, no, honestly, because that would make everything make sense. It's like, okay, I can see how somebody would be like, oh, I bet if you did this, they wouldn't still follow you. Just like sprinkling in little.
I'm going to demonstrate that I'm going to demonstrate that I can still win in this scenario.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. No, I mean, that would actually, honestly, like that's, you know what? I'm a Christian now. You're right.
You did it.
You've done it.
Yes!
You know, I'm starting.
Screenshot.
Yeah. The Church of Jumanji, the Church of Pets, the Church of Job. That would make a lot more sense than what I've been told by other people, I guess.
And the truth is, I don't know, but I don't know what, because think about it, from your point of view, you're like, man, God's going to send like a lot of people to hell, and he created them this way. And then on the flip side, like God literally became a human, and he's going to spend the rest, in Jesus, right?
In Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, right? The Son, the eternal Son became flesh, and like he's still God, but he's fully God, fully man, but he became a human, and that now is his state for eternity. So that's like a huge downgrade, right?
So now God, you don't think that Jesus, do you think Jesus went to heaven, or do you think he's literally still here on earth, like as a body in the dirt?
No, I think Jesus is alive and physical form in heaven.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So like his human form went to heaven. Got it.
Yeah. So it's the cool term is hypostatic union, but he is fully God, fully man, one being now, right? So it's not, there's not two separate beings. He is right. He is that for eternity. And that is how he basically
went and like joined his Father as like a singular entity as well. Father,
like
Son,
sitting at the right hand of the Father is what they like. The Trinity is kind of tough because it's a little bit counterintuitive, because it's one being of God, one eternal being of God, shared co-equally by three persons, right? So it's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. That's the thing you see atheists say, right?
Oh, I've actually never heard that. That's the first time, but I believe it.
But it's inconsistent, right? Yeah. How's 1 + 1 + 1 = 1? But it's more like 1 F plus 1S plus 1H equals 1G, if that makes sense. If we could break it into a math problem, does that make sense?
Listen, I was terrible at math.
I just lost you.
I believe you. I believe you.
That equation works.
At least, hey, listen, at least I didn't say that 1 + 1 + 1 should have equaled 1. I wasn't like, what's the problem with that? I don't.
So there are three distinct people that, the Bible tells us that Jesus was face to face with the Father. And so they're doing separate things. We have the moments in the scripture where the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit are all in the same place, where they talk to each other, where Jesus has said, I'm going to send my Spirit, right? So there's three things, three different beings, all completely unified in the mission, doing different things, right? But definitely different persons. We exist as one being, one person, right? Yeah. So the idea of one being three persons that are all equally me and not each other's, it's weird.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and I mean this totally seriously. It's going to sound like I'm being sarcastic, but just hear me out. Have you ever tried shrooms?
Yes, way back in the day.
So when I was on shrooms, I 100% felt the difference between my brain and my body as like
really
two separate entities controlling
things, right?
one life. Yeah. But it felt good. It was like, wow, we've been doing this for so long together. Look at us.
We got it.
Yeah. Like I literally said that to myself in a mirror.
We're going somewhere.
Yeah, it was a long day. But that being said, is there anything about atheism? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but is there any particular thing about atheism where you're just like, I don't get it? Like how can you possibly, or what would your answer be to this atheist or something like that, where you're just like, how do you live your life that way?
Personally, I think atheism just goes against our lived experience. To me, in my mind, it's, not to be just too blunt. I don't know if I am or not.
I have no feelings.
Okay.
Do it.
Is this an AI you?
I have no feelings. I've been a woman on the internet for 20 years.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't mean it insulting, right? No. When I talk about atheism, I'm not talking about the people. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the ideology. I just think it goes against our lived experience. I think there's so much in life that reflects that we're more than just this matter. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of philosophical commitments that come with atheism that, quite frankly, in my conversations, it doesn't feel like atheists have really thought out these things, or at least asked the question like, oh, if this is true, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so I think,
do you have like an example of like a question like that?
Yeah. So this is something new that I've learned. So I'm unsure how clear I'll be as I explain it. So if I'm just not getting it, maybe I'll just stop talking about it. But, okay. But for instance, how does an atheist have any knowledge claim given the like a materialistic evolutionist worldview? In other words, how could you tell me if you are just matter, right? If you are at your basic, most simple, reduced to chemistry, right? You're matter in motion. You are an accidental arrangement of atoms that is the result of billions of events that you have no control over, right? And if you rearrange these atoms, so this particular arrangement of atoms is an atheist. If we tweak that a little bit, you'd be a theist. If we rearrange it a little bit more, you might be, I don't know, a block of cheese, right? Like it's that. So
I disagree with that. I would say, for example, me, if you were to tweak my atoms, I would be like just a little bit. I would be me with Down syndrome, or I would be me with birth defects, or I would be me with something different. Like your genetics change so much. Now, some genetic differences survive, like say people with Down syndrome, they can be functioning members of society. Many genetic tweaks don't survive at all, so we never see them. if that makes sense.
Yeah, but even more, think even more than that. Me and you are made of the exact same substance, right? We're like literally. I'm more
made
of
of some pretty tough shit. I don't know.
I'm more of it. I'm probably 2.5 times what you are, but
yeah.
But we're just, whatever, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen,
sugar,
right?
spice, everything nice.
Exactly.
Did you go to elementary school?
Yeah. See, exactly. So you know what I'm talking about. So literally, you could rearrange this and have me. It's an accident. The fact that you're here, that we're here, having this conversation is an accident. So given that, how would you make any kind of truth claim? Because it's not like you've stumbled on truth. You just accidentally happen to be arranged in a particular way in which you would say these things. I think that, to me, when I think about that would bother me. Like, golly, I can't.
It doesn't bother me. I am glad it happened in the sequence that it did, but it doesn't bother me in any way. But it does make me curious how high a percentage it could have been likely that I'm not here, or that I'm not me, or that I'm not a female, or something like that. But that doesn't actually bother me, because it is what it is in a way. Now, if something were wrong with me, right? Like if like I one of my eyes didn't work, or if I was born without a hand or something like that, I might say, God, like, oh, I'm angry that that happened to me. Like, I'm angry that my genetic timeline came to this point, which maybe people are, maybe people aren't. I might be inconvenienced by that happening. And I know that there are a lot of health problems that are very expensive and inconvenient for people, right? Like, I imagine that people who have to take insulin every day are probably not stoked that they have to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not something that can be undone, so I'm not worried about it.
Well, okay.
That makes sense. Like, nobody can come up to me and like unravel my atoms, if that makes sense.
That's true. Yeah. So you are who you are. Now, or do you have any reaction or feelings about the fact that you could just as likely be an atheist as a Christian? Like, if you are matter, if you're just want to set the table a little bit. If you really are just matter and motion, just chemistry, then a little bit of change to your physical structure, right? Means all of a sudden we're having this conversation, except for I'm the atheist and you're the Christian.
So I was actually a devout Christian for the majority of my life, up until 25 or 26, I think. So I don't think that change is genetic. I think that change is, I think genetics allowed human beings to operate in a way that we have brains that allow for thought and consideration and ideas and opinions, things like that. And those thoughts and opinions can change based on external factors, internal factors, right? If people hurt you, or if people are kind to you, you're the same exact DNA pile that I am can still be impacted by external factors or internal factors. I had kidney failure when I was 21, right? Big change there, big change. I do think my genetics caused that kidney to fail, but I don't think they controlled what I did after that. I think that is brains operating in the way that we are allowed to operate at this point in the timeline, if that makes sense.
Right. And your brain still being material, though, right?
Yeah. Your brain being material. But I do think things like substances can alter your decision-making skills. Things like brain injuries, TBIs, right? Like when I was hit by that drunk driver, luckily nothing happened, but it could have. And that external factor I could have woken up a Christian. Literally, like I could have, and that's any Christians listening. I'm not saying you have to have a TBI to be a Christian. That's not what I'm saying. Like, I realized as I said that, I was like, I'm not saying you have to get a traumatic brain injury, but I think brains operate the way they do because we're in the right point in the developmental and evolutionary timeline that they work this way. And so some of the decisions you make, I think, are based on genetics, like the things that you crave, whether or not you lose body fat as fast as other people, whether or not you're predisposed to be an alcoholic. And then other things change externally. And so I do not think I was genetically born to be a devout Christian when I was a kid. And I don't think I was genetically born to be an atheist as an adult. I think external factors have just as much to do with that as internal factors.
But aren't if your brain is just matter, if it's chemistry, then chemistry, you can't trick it. It's not, you can't, chemistry is not
can
diluted.
alter it. You can alter it and you can change it.
Well, I mean, that would be, you would be kind of hypothesizing on something that maybe we don't know about. Like if
we do know about it with psychedelics.
No, I'm not talking about I'm sorry. I was talking about like your brain actually changing state. But
oh, you mean like,
yeah,
okay,
like physically, like physically.
I see, like, yes.
Yeah. But your brain is an input output machine. It takes in inputs and it gives outputs, and those outputs are governed by natural law. If the world is material, these are the things, this is what I'm saying. Assuming the world is material, assuming we got here by evolution through accident, your brain is actually a computer that just takes in takes in inputs, and then chemical reactions happen, and then you act. But you're not actually in control of that. Are you? Do you think you're in control of that?
No, but I also don't think you're in control of that either. So like criminals, I don't think many criminals are in charge of the decisions that they made.
Okay, so then so in that context, where is any truth claim fit into that? You kind of have to abandon truth because you're like, I don't really know I don't know that anything's true. All I know is that my brain gets signals input and then it processes them, and then I act out based on that.
Well, when you say truth claim, do you mean like scientific truth? Do you mean I think truth absolutely exists. And I think we learn more and more about truth the longer that we're alive as human beings. And just like I'm a human being who, for whatever reason, is predisposed to things like public speaking, debate, theater, there are human beings that are predisposed to science, like medicine, psychology. And so there are things that we do know about the human brain. Now, whether or not there's a reason for that, whether or not the human brain has a purpose and human beings have a purpose. For example, a lot of religious people think that there is a reason and a purpose that we're here. I think all the same things are true. For example, religious people, they believe, obviously, that we are human beings with organs and brains. They think it came from a different place and they think it has a different purpose. I think it came from a different place and it has a different purpose, but I still know what I believe. And science changes all the time. So maybe a study comes out today and it says, this is how your brain works. This is how it impacts you as a human being. I'd be like, wow, that's wild. And then 5 years from now, they're like, I'm so sorry. We have better technology now. We understand this to be the way things work. I will then change my opinion and say, oh, interesting that these people, I'm so grateful that they're studying these things.
Yeah.
But I think the exact same way that you believe that you've been predisposed to live a certain way and to be a certain person because God made you that way, I think genetics and evolution predisposed me to be who I am and predicted who I'm going to be. And neither one of us can do much more about it, if that makes sense.
That's fine. That's 100% true, I think. I think the difference is if you're from the atheist worldview, if you're an accidental arrangement of atoms, a particular fizzing of chemicals that came about just by chance, and I am that also, then how are you able to say that your fizzing brain is true and my fizzing brain is not true? Does that make sense?
I think both can be at the same time. I 100% believe you.
But we're saying two opposite things. We're saying two things that can't be true at the same time.
So as an atheist, I say, never seen God, never felt God, never heard God. But you have. Just the same exact way that I can eat cilantro and taste soap, you can eat cilantro and taste cilantro. neither one of us are lying. And I don't think anything you're saying is a lie. I don't believe that it's true. I have not seen enough evidence to suggest that God is real. You have. And you know that to be true. One of us are wrong. And I'm just willing to place bets on what I've seen and experienced a lot more than on what you've seen and experienced, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense.
Like, I 100% believe everything that you say and that you believe and that you think and that you feel. I've just never once experienced that in my life. So if I had to place bets on either one being true, I would pick my side based on my personal experience of the world.
But also, and that's true. Okay, I get what you're saying. But also, ultimately, it's a accident of nature. Like, because if a little different, a little tweak to you, and you see things totally different. And what you're describing, where you just say both things are true at the same time, I mean, that's really kind of abandoning truth at that point, isn't it?
Well, let me rephrase that. Both beliefs are true at the same time, not both end results. So in somewhere in the universe, I am right, and somewhere in the universe, you are right, right? So say there's these two planes. On one, I'm right. On one, you're right. In both of those examples, we believe to our core that we are correct and that we've seen everything we need to see in order to feel satisfied what we believe. Whether or not it's because God decided that we were going to make those decisions and follow those paths, whether or not it's because the chemicals in our brain are fizzing in the way that they're supposed to fizz because of evolution. At the end of the day, we are both telling the truth in terms of what we think, what we feel, what we experience. Only one of us can be right, though.
Yeah, I guess, is that the kind of like the concept of my truth and your truth? Because I would reject that a little bit. One of us is not saying the truth.
Right. One of us is wrong. One of us. Yeah. So I think there is. So you know how they always say there's in a story, there's always my side, your side, and the truth.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here. But the only difference is, I think what gets misconstrued a lot, both with atheists and with Christians and religious people, is they think that one side is lying to try and get their way or to try and convince other people to join. And I don't think that's either one of us. I 1000% believe you.
Yeah, no, and I don't think I'm not like when I say there's no truth, I'm not like saying you're a liar. I'm saying I'm not even saying you can't know truth. I'm saying you can know truth, but because God exists.
So we can't know, atheists can't know truth any more sure than Christians can.
Well, no, I would disagree.
Okay.
I would disagree. And I would disagree because, in my worldview, God created me with meaning, with purpose, and he has a plan for me. He gave me reliable senses. They weren't an accident of evolution, which I think that's a kind of a related topic, but similar. Like, why would you even trust your senses if they're just an accident of evolution? But he gave me senses so that in a mind that could rationally understand the world, so that I could know him. Right. So that's coming from two totally different places. If from the atheist worldview, what you said really is true. From the atheist worldview, if we are just the product of evolution, well, what you say and what I say are both true at the same time, because there really isn't any such thing as true. I heard a pastor say one time, he said, it's like taking a can or a bottle of Coke and a bottle of Pepsi, shaking them up, watching them fizz, and then asking which one's true. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not. It's just we're living out this biology that we inherited for no help of our own.
Right.
Conversely, from a Christian worldview, no, you are very special, made by God for a particular purpose. Right. Me and I am as well. And so therefore I can have confidence in knowing the truth and relying on my senses and understanding science and the scientific method, and all these things spill from that.
Yeah.
Because I have that foundation that God is behind all of it. Right. Yeah. And you kind of, I'm sorry, atheism loses that. A good one is, go ahead.
I would disagree there, only because when we're talking about like senses and sensory things, I would say that, and correct me if I'm taking the word senses in a different direction than you mean. I would actually say that evolution has given me a really phenomenal use of my senses in terms of literal senses like hear, see, smell, taste, but also senses like fear, anxiety, the ability to know when someone's walking behind me without seeing them. I experience all of those very clearly. And I think the only main difference, and maybe, and I, if this is offensive, I apologize, but I truly think the only main difference between what Christians think and what atheists think is why. I really think that's it. I think we experience our senses very similarly. We experience the world very similarly. We experience the society that we live in with the same lens. The only difference is I'm walking around going, I'm so glad that I exist on this timeline. This is just a wonderful time to be alive. And you're saying, I'm here for a much more clear purpose that God put me here for. I'm saying, I really can't control who I am or what I'm like. All I can do is the best with the decisions that my brain allows me to make. You're saying, I'm going to make these decisions based on what it feels like God is telling me to do. We're making the same decisions. We both came to Conversation Coalition. We're both on this podcast. We're making so many of the same decisions. The only difference is I'm saying it's interesting that my biology is dictating that this is what I'm into. And you're saying, I want to figure out what God has in store for me and why I'm on this path or this journey.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I suspect that it still comes from an atheist worldview because, you know, the way you're analyzing me, you're just taking, I'm just you, but from a different perspective, which I think is a little bit different than what I'm saying. I would say we engage the world the same way, you and I, and you can trust your senses. I'm not trying to say you can't trust your senses. I'm not just trying to create this fake reality where how do you know you're a jar in a brain? I mean, a brain in a jar, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that unlike that silliness, atheism does have a real problem with the fact that atheists believe that everything that we're here and who we are is an accident. And if it's a chance accident in the universe, there's no reason to trust it. It's hard to justify trusting it, right? Justify trusting it, I should say. Now, there are a lot of animals, there's a lot of organisms that don't have all of the senses we have, and they do just fine. In fact, they outnumber us by, you know, factors of 100 probably. You know, there's all these.
But do they have stock?
They do.
The stock market? I don't think they do.
They don't have podcasts.
Yeah, so I don't think they do. They need me to open the door so they can go take a piss. Like, I don't think they're doing as good as me.
But I think like one fundamental thing about evolution is that it's survival based, right? We're just like, it's everything that gets passed on is about survival fitness. It's not about truth. It's not about podcasts. It's not about anything. It's about survival fitness, right? Sure. And so your senses are just survival. And let's be honest, you don't have to know the truth to survive. In fact, I can make the argument that evolution has selected for religious behaviors.
Yes.
Based on the fact that almost everybody is religious, right?
No, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the human brain is literally developed to accept religion. Yeah.
So it's selected. So in that respect, like religion is good because, you know, religious people have more babies and they are engaged in less risky behaviors. I'm making some of this up, but I'm saying you could say these things, right?
Like the
I think the babies thing is real though.
I know. I think the babies thing is real. I've seen the Duck.
Yeah.
I think it's real.
I know, right? So because of that, be fruitful, multiply. So, you know, you could make that argument from the atheist worldview, and it's different. And what I was getting to was you can trust your senses, but you can trust your senses because God exists, right? Because, and don't take offense to this, but just I think we know anyway, what I think is that because atheism isn't true, you can trust your senses. That's the ultimate conclusion, right? So no, I'm not saying you can't trust your senses. I'm saying from your worldview, you can't justify it, which is
I think the justification would be, I don't want my existence to be worse. If that makes sense. Like your senses protect you in a way. Yeah. So it's like, I'm here, I'm alive. I may not have any idea why. Maybe my genes just crashed together in the right point of the historical timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be worse. I could be in pain. I could be suffering. I could be
Mm-hmm.
hungry. I could
Mm-hmm.
be cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be unsafe, and by trusting my senses, like you said, it's a survival thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I would rather be me right now here than me suffering or me unhappy or me in suffering consequences of not having listened to those senses, I guess.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I guess what I'm saying is sort of like on a metaphysical level, because again, I do believe you can trust your senses, is if knowledge is a justified true belief, right? It's a true belief that we can justify.
Okay.
Atheism has the true and the belief part, but they can't justify any of it. And it's true and you believe it because God exists, but because you took God out of it, you really can't justify any of it.
I think I'll only disagree with you in that I think our justification is just not good enough for other people.
Well,
so I can justify it, but it's not going to be the justification I think that you want. It's not going to be enough, I think.
I would say, and again, I don't want to sound mean, but
no, go for it.
You tell me I'm too blunt, but I would want to, if you gave me a justification, I would want to like parse through it and see if it held up. And so that, going back to the beginning, the reason that I think atheism is false is because it lacks a major component of just being able to like bump around the world, which is being able to justify what you believe. Right. So to me, it's counterintuitive. It goes against my lived experience. And so I go, it can't possibly be true. It goes against my lived experience. Right.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Just like
we went down a rabbit hole there.
We did. But I feel the exact same way when people say that cilantro tastes like soap. I'm like, how can you say that? I have eaten cilantro all the time. It is delicious. I would never make a soup without cilantro in it. How can you possibly say that?
Do people say that?
It's literally a genetic disorder.
Oh, you said it tastes like soap. I'd say it tastes like cilantro. I was like, what a weird thing to contrast.
No, it's a literal genetic trait where some people when they eat cilantro, it tastes like soap. And I believe them, but I have never lived that experience and I can't fathom living that experience. And when I think about that, it makes me so sad because I love cilantro.
I know, right?
So good. Right. And so I completely understand when people who believe in God and they've experienced God and they felt God look at somebody like me and they go, how can you look around you and not attribute this to God and like not attribute this to intelligent design? And I get that. I do. Because if I had experienced God and was still like, nah, that would not make sense, right? Like that would be confusing.
Right.
But because I have never personally experienced God, I can't say that that's a wager I'd be willing to bet because I personally have no evidence to back that up. To me, it is like anything else that I have no evidence to back up. I don't hate God. I don't dislike God. I'm not anti-God. I have no problems with God whatsoever. But to me, it's like having a problem with a fictitious TV character. It makes as much sense as that because I've never been there. But I believe people who have. I 100% believe people who have. And I don't think they are lying. And I think that they've experienced something that I've just never experienced.
Yeah. And I was like, trying to be careful to talk about this, to do that internal critique, like without appealing to God until like the very end. But sorry, my one headphone went out.
No.
But what you were saying, so I would offer that to you. You're not persuaded by it, and that's fine. But I'm going to offer that to you as a proof, right? You say, what's proof of the existence of God? Well, it's the impossibility of the contrary, right? It's the fact that we can't it's impossible that he doesn't exist. And the proof, one part of the evidence, one part of the proof I just offered you is that without God, we can't make sense of the world. Right?
But I think that's where we disagree. And this might be something that just goes around and around. I can make sense of the world, but I think when you believe in someone like God, that is such a great meaning and purpose and reason to be here that my reasoning doesn't sound like reasoning, because there's just no way that the reason could be that simple, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think you can make sense of the world. And I would say because God exists, right? Because God exists, you're able to make sense of the world.
Got it.
But I'm offering that as a proof, as evidence for God, because if you like just play it out in your head and just mull over it, when you take God out of the picture, when you make us chance accidents in the universe, well, now we got to start thinking about some other things like truth, right? Which is a big one. So that's why I say I offer that as I think intelligent design is another great one. When I heard, like, I think this is good evidence for God, because all there besides DNA, all like information comes from a mind. Like there's no example anywhere of information that doesn't come from a mind. The one special pleading that we have is DNA. And I think that's fascinating, because when I learned this, that you've got your A, G, C, T amino acids, right?
Yeah.
It's not a physical property of the amino acid that causes you to have some trait. It's not a physical property. It's not a chemical reaction. It's actually information. It's the arrangement of the amino acids that is information that the cell is able to read and use. It's not. Right. It's like the difference. And you might be just understanding me, but I'll just kind of elaborate a little bit. It's like when I write CAT on a piece of paper. Yeah. It's not because graphite sticks to paper or there's some chemical reaction. It's not a physical property of the graphite or the paper. It's the fact that those shapes have meaning already, right? Yeah. It's information. Yeah. And I think that's fascinating. So when I see that, and then I look at DNA, and I spent some time learning about it. I'm no expert, but it's like there's this really, really complicated system of information inside of us that if everywhere we look and every time we find information, we assume it comes from a mind. I think to be consistent, I have to assume that that the genetic code came from a mind, right? Yeah. Yeah. Even if you want to extrapolate it was an alien or something like that, at least then we're on the same page. Like, yeah, okay, that's a consistent interpretation of that thing. So that would offer that as an evidence for God.
Interesting. Right? And whereas I would say it's just taken millions of years to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's an example of where I think, even though in my mind it's like, yeah, it's taken millions and millions of years for processes to develop over time. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's not and this, for lack of a better way to put it, I feel like that's not a good enough answer for people when the alternative to them is intelligent design. And that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think, again, that it's proof, it's evidence. You're just not persuaded by it, right?
Yeah, and
right, that's what you're saying. It's like, oh yeah, I see. It's something that you say. I see the way you're understanding it.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. But it doesn't move the needle for you. You're not persuaded,
right?
By it.
Because I would say it's a reason. I wouldn't necessarily call either one of our opinions evidence. I would call them reasons. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't say like, this is my evidence. That's your evidence. I would say that's your reason. That's my reason. This is my explanation. That's your explanation. Yeah. So what do you, if you had to guess, and I know that there's probably not a way to really determine this, but if you had to guess, what do you think the purpose or plan for your future is? Like, where do you feel that going? Or is there a way to know what God has in store for you?
Well, that's a good question. I'm at a little bit of a frustrated point, I think, in my life, because I'm 46 and I'm like, I kind of wish I would have got motivated to want to be in service to God earlier. Although, all those life experiences bring you to this point, but still, I know that's what makes me me. That's what makes me say this at this moment. Yeah, but at the same time, so I am searching for something. Right now, what I've been thinking about and considering is I went through this journey of where once I kind of switched to Calvinism and submitted to the sovereignty of God. And then that made me think like, okay, well, if God is sovereign over everything, if Jesus is Lord over everything, he's Lord over everything, right? So then I started diving into philosophy and apologetics. And so, I started learning presuppositional apologetics, which really is consistent with Calvinism, with Reformed theology. Mm-hmm. And then from there went into science, right? Mm-hmm. And just on this journey, I feel like I gained the confidence to not feel like the church is losing to the world, right? Because science is a good, easy one. That's like low-hanging fruit, because the scientific community is just secular. It just is, right? Now, there are Christian scientists. They're out there, right? Answers in Genesis, the Biblical Science Institute, Institute for Creation Research, right? BioLogos, even though I wouldn't agree with their theology or their science, but there are Christian scientists out there, but the science is overwhelmingly secular, and you're constantly told, right, that the universe is 14 billion years old, that the earth is 4.5 billion years old, that we evolved, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's this whole narrative, and it's everywhere. It's taken for granted at this point, mm-hmm. right? That it just is true, and it's the way it is. And so as I started to explore science from a presuppositional point of view, in other words, let's start with the Bible is true. Let's start with the Word of God is true. God exists. Now let's look at science. I was like, well, if the Bible is true, then science should reflect the truth of the Bible, right? It's not, science doesn't prove the Bible, right? Because then that makes science the ultimate authority. The Bible is true. This is the thought process. The Bible is true. Therefore, science should support the Bible. Well, you're not going to find that from a secular textbook, right? I love science, like space, astronomy, like math. I love those things, right? So I have no problem with just learning these facts about the universe, even if I disagree with the conclusions that are drawn. But it should. So you're not going to learn that from a secular scientist. So I had to start listening to Christian scientists. And we're talking about like Harvard PhD geologists and astrophysicists. And these people are brilliant in their fields. Yeah. They're just saying something that's against the narrative. So it doesn't get any love from the secular world, right? But my point was is that I then, after spending, some time, because this is kind of a long journey for me, learning about science from a Christian worldview, I was like, oh, I can have confidence in science. I can have confidence in philosophy. I can have confidence in theology. And so all that was a long answer to the question, which was, I would love to figure out how to give people that same confidence, just to show them that you can have confidence, that I can talk about the world. I believe the world was created 6,000 years ago, and I can have an intelligent conversation about that. That doesn't include appealing to just like, whenever I get confused, I just go, God did it. Right. I don't have to do that. We can talk about science. We can talk about, the truth of it. And so I would love to figure out a way. That was actually kind of my motivation with the podcast with Gary, was I just, I'm speaking to Gary, but I'm not really speaking to Gary. I'm speaking to a wider audience, right? And I would love to just have the ability to conversate with an atheist and to give Christians confidence that you're not a Bronze Age goat herder, right? You're not a dummy because you believe these things. Right. I just, we can have rational conversations, and atheism and secular science has its problems. Like they present it to you as if it's settled. It's far from. Right.
Yeah. And I would just like to apologize to the Bronze Age sheep herders that listen to this podcast. The opinions expressed in this podcast, that was just utterly.
Okay, you've heard people say that though, right? The Bible was written by Bronze Age goat herders. And you're like, come on.
First of all, bronze is a beautiful color. Let's just start there. Bronze is third place. I want everybody to remember that. There's lots of bronze athletes out there.
And people pay good money to do goat yoga. Like,
I'm telling you.
There's a place for everyone.
There's a place for everybody. And this podcast is one of them. So I need you to take back what you said.
No, I love the goat herders.
Well, Aaron, I realized I just looked at the clock and I realized I've kept you like 30 minutes longer than I said I would.
Oh, you said this would go fast.
Yeah, it goes really fast. Mm-hmm. Like every episode ends with me going, I'm so sorry I kept you this long. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
But if people wanted to check out your podcast, it's not out yet, right? It's coming out. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So then what I'll do is once it's out, I'll come back to this episode and I'll link it in the show notes for people to come back and find. So anybody who's listening, if you have questions for Aaron, if you have thoughts or comments, if you're listening on YouTube, you can comment there. But if you're listening on any of the audio platforms, please send me an email. You can find my email in the show notes at whatever platform you're on. I would love to hear your thoughts for Aaron, whether you have questions, comments, you liked the episode, you had thoughts. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And please let us know. And maybe there could be a part 2. I feel like there could be a part 2 because we could just keep
100%.
talking.
So I would just say this. I just thought about this while you were talking. I love to be challenged. I love when I read something about science and it makes me go, wow, that really challenges what I think. Yeah. In fact, at the Lipscomb Conversation Coalition event, Elliot said something. We were talking and he said something that just shut my mouth, and I like sat down. I was like, okay, I got to disengage from you because you just made me think. My brain's when the gears were turning, right? Yeah, the gears were turning.
First of all, how dare
you? I'm the one who's right here.
Yeah, I didn't come here to be challenged.
Yes. So I love it. I love to be challenged. I love to be asked questions, and I love things that seem difficult and working through them. So if people comment, I'll say I will click back. Just because it's something I like, I'll click back to this video, and if people did comment, I'll respond to it.
Yeah. And I'll send you, I'll send you the direct link to this episode on all platforms when it comes out. And yeah, anybody listening, feel free to comment. Like, we're here to engage, to discuss, to be challenged, to hear your thoughts and opinions. So you can comment publicly, you can email me, and I'll make sure that Aaron gets all the emails and comments and questions. Or if you're brave enough, you can apply to be on the show, which is also in the show notes. If you've got opinions and thoughts, apply to be on the show and come in here and say it to my face.
Do it. And then I'll come roast you on your podcast. Yeah.